Hello, everyone. I hope you're all having a wonderful day today. It's Zakiziel here, and today I'll be reacting to I Can't Believe It's Not Magic, Technocratic Union Mage Lore by TheBurgerkrieg. Sorry to take so long getting to this, but better late than never. Since this is a long video, I'll be doing it in 4 parts. The first of which will be about half an hour. But without further ado, let's get into this.
Mage the Ascension is a pen and paper RPG about being a plucky magician who defies the dark realities of the world by sheer force of will. I already made a video on like the good guys from that setting, the 9 mystic traditions that span from the wand swishing type wizard to the LSD taking type wizard. So today I'm going to be talking about the bad guys who are evil and they hate magic because the good characters use it.
Or as Big D would call them, the fascists in line with the New World Order, like Nikola Tesla.
Momo and the Grey Men, these are the Grey Men who are just, they're bad people and they're jealous of magic and that's why they want to destroy it. Meet Google Drive. I mean, the technocracy. I mean, sure, that maybe they do study magic for the purposes of, like, understanding it, researching it, and maybe they do classify the laws of the universe based on, like, a complex metaphysical system that includes analogous concepts to the 9 spheres of magic. But they just do that to, like, understand how magic works. They don't call them, like, weird mystical names like, oh, the spirit sphere. What a ridiculous concept. It's dimensional science. And yeah, sure, maybe they do use the understanding that they have of those spheres that aren't really spheres of magic to sometimes make things happen that ordinarily wouldn't happen. But that isn't magic, it's science. It's enlightened science, in fact, which is regular science, but gooder. And
You know, that's very funny to me, considering how in his video on the 9 mystic traditions, the fact that there were not 1, but 2 separate groups that used to be allied with, or was it members of the technocracy, that split off. And like the idea of like using well, mathematical instruments such as calculators as their focus for casting magic.
sure, maybe each of them is also in contact with some sort of entity that guides them on their path to greater mastery over enlightened science. And maybe those entities sometimes have like strange and deeply symbolic sort of, ways of popping into the worlds of these people, sometimes even mystical ones like dragons and fairies. Highly depends on the individual. Might also be a phone call voice that calls you sometimes. But those are not avatars or some other strange notion of like there being a divine shard that exists within all people, but only mages are attuned to it, and that's the defining characteristic that helps them bend reality to their will. That's just your genius. It's like a subconscious manifestation of your ideal enlightened self, and theoretically, like, everyone has the ability to get a genius, but you are attuned to it, and that's what
It sound like what the Technocratic Union is doing sounds like essentially like magic, but they're in denial that it's magic. But probably because they've convinced enough people that magic, at least as most people would think of it, doesn't exist. The consensus has shifted. So I don't know, maybe the sleepers can make use of this stuff because enough people will believe that this is how reality works for it to be so.
makes you enlightened. And of course it's gonna look strange and idiosyncratic. It comes from your subconscious. There's nothing magical about that. And maybe, yeah, the genius does take you along a certain path that has steps, and you sometimes fall into maybe a sort of trance-like state, or like an introverted phase where you try to attain a greater level of power. But that's not the same thing as what superstitionists call arete. It's simply the amount of enlightenment that you are. And the more enlightenment that you are, the more you happen to understand reality and how to, change it around because you're enlightened. But that doesn't mean that technocrats are the same as mages. In fact, that's really an unmutual thing of you to say right there, my friend. You should stop saying that, or I might have to report you to our supervisor, for your own good. So if you haven't caught on yet, technocrats are in fact, like mechanically speaking on a meta level, but also in-universe, mages. They are humans that have attained the understanding that reality is a fundamentally malleable illusion. And the deeper their understanding of that fact, the more adept they become at shaping the malleable aspects of that illusion. Except, of course, that this is the precise point where tradition mages and technocrats diverge. Technocrats may not call it magic, but they do use magic, and they do it responsibly. Because they believe that breaking the laws of nature is reality deviance. And reality deviance is evil. But let's start at the beginning, eh? Reality, the, thing that you perceive around yourself, is shaped by consensus. We went over this in my original Mage video, but basically consensus is a complex set of rules that describes the things that the people who are in a certain area believe to be possible. And what people believe to be possible is not the same everywhere. Not just different cultures and large geographic regions have different beliefs about reality. Where you are within your own city, things might just feel different there. Receiving actionable information on how the future of a given person might play out from, like, a crystal ball, that might not work in a high-tech computer lab, but in the tent of a fortune teller? Conversely, calculating the probabilities of certain future events might be possible with that kind of computing power. If you've ever been in like a high-tech computer lab, sometimes you feel that things are more advanced here than they are just outside the door. Whereas with a crystal ball, of course you can't do that kind of shit. It's a crystal ball. Both of these effects are magic, and they are actually also the same effect. They're a time, maybe an entropy effect. They're just achieved through different means based on the places that they are in and the consensus that is predominant in those places.
Considering, how important consensus is for, making it easier to do magic without getting slapped with paradox. And I get the feeling that what the Technocratic Union does is when they say that, oh, they're responsible with this stuff. They don't do reality deviance. It's like, well, technically they can say they're responsible because they're not messing with the laws of reality. But on the other hand, if you indoctrinate enough people into thinking magic isn't real, at least, again, what most people recognize as being magic, like waving wands and using crystal balls and stuff, and as a result of that, anyone who does this sort of stuff is gonna get slapped with paradox, probably. Then they're essentially changing the rules and then saying that they are responsible for playing by the rules that they have changed for their own benefit. Or maybe it might be more accurate to, instead of saying for their own benefit, to say to the exclusion of others, that is.
An awakened individual can defy consensus and manifest whatever they wanted to manifest anyway, but it is always easier to work with consensus than against it. And so, ever since the very beginning of Magick, mages have tried to shape their local consensus to suit their preferences, and to stymie the attempts of any mages that might disagree with their particular worldview. Thus, for thousands of years, reality was a patchwork where different things were true in different parts of the world. 1,000 years ago, there really were portals to the fairy realms all over Ireland. Mayan blood sacrifices to gods really did make for a better maize crop. And following the advice of an onmyoji to, rearrange the way your bed stands in your bedroom would truly have changed your fortunes in Heian period Japan. There were also basilisks and dragons and terrible fucking demons that would drink your spinal fluid. Magellan really
Demons drinking it. Okay, that I've actually never heard of an interpretation of demons that drink people's spinal fluids before. I'm actually curious about that.
did meet giants in Patagonia. And all that actually kinda sucks. Not the meeting giants in Patagonia bit specifically, that sounds kinda fucking cool. But to just go outside the house and like see some sort of beautiful woman and then she transforms into a giant spider and eats me, having some fucking demonic spirits sit on my chest at night and just torture me, having my actual literal head explode because I heard a weird cry in the woods. It's not a good time, it's just not good to be in an existence that is like this. And I'm not even at the part where some like wizard cuts me up for parts because he's trying to make his dick bigger. Let's face it.
Oh yeah. I forgot that there were I almost forgotten that like that in like real world mythology there were, I don't know if they still exist, cultures where they actually believed in that sort of thing, like using body parts for rituals and stuff. Granted, most of the ones that I know off the top of my head, it use animal body parts, such as tiger phallus, but you get the idea.
For most of history, for most people, reality has been kind of a raw deal. And throughout all of that history, there have been some among the awakened magical population who have thought to themselves, hang on a second, what the fuck are we, like, doing? Like, really, from an ethical perspective, what are we doing manipulating all these people to, like, as treating them as tools to make things for our own personal advancement? Usually while patting ourselves on the back for how well we're protecting them from the monsters that we make them believe in. The world should be predictable to most people. Like, it shouldn't just be that you, because you're awakened, you can use that power to dominate everything. That's fucked up. Being awakened doesn't, like, entitle you to take advantage of everyone who isn't. That line of thinking is what led to the technocracy as we know it today.
Yeah, I can also imagine why the Hermetic Order really would not like that line of thinking, considering that they were, well, the aristocracy of magical society.
The purpose of the technocracy is to basically be the antithesis to the world of darkness. It's like the characters of this grimdark universe realized that they were in a grimdark universe and were like, no. In this setting, where supernatural horrors lurk behind every street corner, the technocracy's mission is to protect people from these dangers and to create a stable, globalized society where regular people can lead good lives without having to worry about vampires, witches, and spirits. And to do this, they must create a unified, worldwide consensus, one where all the rules are the same everywhere. And those rules need to be based in science, reason, not any arbitrary bullshit, so everyone can access the achievements of enlightened science. At that point, is it really magic at all anymore? And in order to achieve this, the world must be cleansed of reality deviance, so that one day, when the technocratic mission is fulfilled, all the world can live in a perfect utopia. If we want to refer to the title of the game that we're playing, Mage the Ascension, this is the Ascension bit we're talking about. That's the Ascension Wars aspect, the disagreements on how Ascension is to be achieved. The traditions say that,
Since vampires are immune to paradox, I also wonder, does the consensus have much of an effect on vampires? Like, at all, then? Or are they also just allowed to operate independently from that since they're immune to paradox? Which I imagine that the Technocratic Order probably also wants to wipe out all the vampires. Because then, while they're at it, probably also wipe out all the Garou as well.
That Ascension is every mage's personal journey to godhood. And quite frankly, because in theory anyone can become enlightened, anyone can awaken as a mage, it's fair. Well, I mean, unless you're like a vampire or some other creature that has suffered Gilgul and has been utterly, divorced from its own avatar. The Technocracy, on the other hand, says that Ascension, without taking the rest of humanity along for the ride, is actually selfish and, pointless. If you're sitting there right now saying, Technocracy, more like tech-yescracy, these guys do sound like they're actually the good guys, you just keep on listening. The simplified story of how the Technocracy was founded is that it came out of the Order of Reason, which was already an organization made up of several other organizations that was formed around the 14th century. One of the
So I think that was around the time the Renaissance began.
organizations that made up the Order of Reason, by the way, used to be the Inquisition. The people used to burn witches at the stake. Although the other half of the Inquisition was made of mages of the Celestial Chorus, who just wanted to get rid of their rivals. The modern Technocratic Union was formed when several high-ranking members of the Order of Reason, among other organizations with similar ideological goals, approached Queen Victoria herself with their vision of a unified world free from the dangers of the supernatural, where common people could live in peace and prosperity, thanks to all the marvels that technology would continue to deliver. And Queen Victoria said, yeah, cool, bruh, I've got a whole police force that's already kind of doing a lot of that. And also, my husband used to be one of you. Like, what the fuck did you think I didn't know about all this shit? So my guys are gonna hook up with your guys, and this is, not really a request. I'm the most powerful person on the planet right now. I got sunlight on my empire right now. What are you gonna fucking do? Say no, you little bitch-ass motherfuckers?
Oh, and for those who may not know this bit of history, because honestly, I don't know what they're teaching people in schools these days, is the British Empire was known as the empire upon which the sun never sets, for the reason that isn't that due to how far the empire extended, it was said that it is always daytime somewhere in the empire.
And then the great old men said, chill, bitch. We weren't gonna say no. That fucking rules. That's a great idea. Let's do it. It was in Victorian times, so people used to talk different back then. And don't worry, I do this joke every time that I do it, and it is never funny. And thus, the Technocratic Union was born. It's a very Eurocentric way of telling the story, but it is, not wrong. The Technocracy, as such, was founded in London. But it was also built on the work and paradigms of various scientifically minded mages that existed throughout different cultures throughout history. And as it sort of, went on ahead to take control of the whole world, cabals of those mages distributed all over the world would join them. Often, not necessarily voluntarily, if you catch my drift, because maybe they had very different ideas of what science actually should fucking be. Because, yeah, the Technocracy was, extremely, colonialist and culturally supremacist. As one would have to be, I suppose, to, go ahead and say, look, I know the one way that reality should be that would work best for everyone that could possibly exist anywhere in the world. Technocracy used to be really fucking racist. They would bring along their ideology of secularism alongside colonizers in an effort to create a truly unified reality that would work for everyone. They upended the realities that hundreds of millions of people knew and were comfortable with and replaced them with a reality that was alien to those people. This was reflected.
So basically, I reject your reality and I substitute my own.
in their organizational structure as well, where by and large affluent Europeans were in charge, with a few notable exceptions. It wasn't as sexist as you might expect, because not only was the main founder of the organization a woman, it's also like the fact that women are just as likely to achieve enlightenment and awakening as mages, as men, has been a begrudgingly established fact in the magical community since forever. Still was kind of sexist though. And on fairness, like, this is none of these things were things that didn't also happen in the traditions. Like, it's not like, oh, the colonialist technocracy. No, the Hermetics have their own history of genocide. But in recent decades, the technocracy has begun to understand that it actually turns out to be a huge waste of, like, operatives and allies and intelligence to discriminate systemically against people with different ethnicities or different, sexual or gender orientations. It may only really have been the dimensional anomaly that allowed the technocracy to actually restructure itself to being a lot less wasteful and embracing people that were different and not just deeply conformist. Because people who have different perspectives and different skill sets, actually, they're very good at, like, contributing to the kind of complex problems that the technocracy tackles all the time. So they provide shit like no questions asked, full hypertech, gender-affirming surgeries, whether you fall into any kind of like binary, non-binary matrix, whatever. Although, of course, if you go hog wild and like come up with some new sex organs and have those installed on you, the technocracy can do it, but it's gonna be a problem for you because consensus is not gonna like it, just as if you walked around town with like a cybernetic arm that can shoot laser beams. This recent liberalization
I can't help but imagine someone deciding to replace their genitals with a neutron laser. and getting slapped by Paradox because that violates the consensus.
by the way, does not in any way mean that they are ready to embrace reality deviance, though. They are pretty rigid about that, and if anything, this whole change has made them a bit more self-righteous. But hang on, Burger, you said dimensional anomaly. What is that? Like, you can't just gloss over that. Yeah, so here's where things get a little more complicated on a meta level. The dimensional anomaly, known to tradition mages as the Avatar Storm, is sort of a magical hurricane that is, raging in the folds of between the real world and like the outer dimensional realms. Oversimplifying it massively, it's a storm that is raging within your walls and also your doorframe. And also kind of outside of it in the Umbra realms, all the different kinds of Umbra realms that exist, but very inconsistently there. Basically, a bunch of shit in the Umbra has been devastated, and it's become very difficult to access a lot of the parallel dimensions that the Mage setting relies on. And it came about like this. In 1999, Xerxes Jones, which is a killer name, to be honest, a technocrat, void engineer, member of the Orphic Circle, which is an organization made up of vampires, wraiths, and mages that are trying to figure out the true nature of death, pulled a lot of strings in order to be able to build a nuclear bomb that would be a nuclear bomb that functioned like a nuclear bomb in the underworld. He wanted to see—
Oh no. Did they nuke the afterlife?
how it would affect the Tempest, which is like a ever-present margarine version of the dimensional anomaly that rages in the underworld. But also maybe he was trying to like blow up Oblivion, who, like, nobody really knows this for sure. Meanwhile, the Smiling Lord of the Grim Legion, whom you can find more about if you watch my video on Wraith the Oblivion, set off 2 nuclear bombs of its own, Fat Man and Little Boy of Nagasaki and Hiroshima fame, over the city of Enoch, which is the city where all vampires originally came from. It doesn't exist anymore, therefore it has sunk to like the bottom of the underworld, and it's kind of been pissing off the Stygian hierarchy for a long time. Those detonations then set off Xerxes Jones' bomb long before he was at the spot that he wanted to be at. Meanwhile, on Earth, specifically in northern India. A number of powerful Quajin, which are sort of vampire equivalents that are not actually vampires, they're a different kind of undead that dominate the Far East, were doing battle with Zapatasura, the antediluvian ancestor of the Ravnos vampire clan. There were also like other vampires and tradition mages involved. That's like a footnote at this particular point in time. Why were they doing battle? Well, there was a war between the Ravnos vampires and the Quajin in India, India being like one of the very central parts of the world.
Also, by the way, that image he showed earlier of Zapata sure was terrifying. Like I would not want to encounter that.
Geopolitically speaking and historically, it's always been a sort of clashing ground. But because the Quajin couldn't reproduce en masse, the Ravnos thought to themselves that they could win this battle by themselves mass-embracing young vampires, which then proceeded to die in droves, which sent sort of psychic shockwaves of pain through the generational bloodline of the Ravnos, all the way up to the creator of the clan, Zapatasura, who was laying in torpor in that region, and he woke up from that. This guy is basically a god. Like, he is unbelievably powerful. And if you want to find out more about him, and those like him, you can check out my video on Vampire the Masquerade. The Technocracy saw this situation and assessed it as a massive threat to humanity and the safety of human lives, on account of that is exactly how you should describe this situation. I can think of no better way of describing it. So they used like neutron bombs, which are sort of magical nukes, to weaken Zapatasura and also the Quajin who happened to be there, who were in their own right extremely powerful, let's be serious, and then destroy him with a big laser beam of concentrated sunlight that they created by realigning the orbital mirrors that they have. In other words, the Technocracy was kind of a little bit distracted. These three events coincided, and because they all happened at the same time, like a line of causality in space opened between them, and the immense energy released by these things created the dimensional anomaly. Known in the underworld as the sixth great maelstrom, arguably the strongest of them all. It also sort of cracked open the vaults of hell and let demons out, but let's talk about that some other time. In an event that shook the entire supernatural world to its core, it really fundamentally shook up all of the powerful magical institutions. And most of all, it shook up the Technocracy, upended it, really. Except, and this is crucial, for the fact that it's not clear whether or not the dimensional anomaly happened at all. By which I mean the dimensional anomaly definitely did or didn't occur in your given chronicle in a certain way or other. But whether or not it happened, how exactly it happened, what it entailed, whether it's still happening, that's not actually definitively defined within World of Darkness lore. If you read the Mage 20th anniversary books, you will find that there's a lot of sidebars that talk about, oh, this is how this situation would have played out if the dimensional anomaly had happened, and this is how it would have played out if it had not happened, and then various other qualifications. And all of the books offer various different scenarios and ideas that you can pick. Or, of course, as always, you could make up your own. There's a whole ass plotline where the Technocracy has been infiltrated by Nefandi, which are like, oh, I hate the world and everything is bad, so I want to destroy everything because I'm so fucking edgy type wizards, and that's entirely optional as well. And obviously that's one of the cool things about pen and paper games in general, but also about World of Darkness in particular. No matter how much a lot of people would like to make you believe otherwise, there is no such thing as the World of Darkness. There is only your World of Darkness. With the sheer amount of contradictions and retcons that exist in this setting, sometimes within the same edition of the same game, and like currently with 5th edition, they're retconning pretty much everything, you kind of have to make up the world for yourself, and you are free to do that as you please. Whoever is developing World of Darkness cannot actually tell you how the lore is supposed to be for real. I would love to be able to present to you the real objective World of Darkness, but I can't. I can only show you my own, which is kind of what I'm doing. Personally, I like the middle of the road approach to the Avatar Storm, where it did happen, it did cause an immense amount of havoc, and it did leave permanent scars on the walls of the world. But at this point, it has pretty much subsided, which of course doesn't mean that it's easy to cross the veil between worlds. It never has been. But if you prefer a different scenario, go ahead and use it. This goes so far that if you're like a vampire player sitting in front of your computer, on your couch, on the toilet, in your truck, wherever, thinking, hang on, there is a what? And it has access to what? Jesus Christ, the Second Inquisition is the least of our problems. You can run a Vampire the Masquerade Chronicle where the technocracy doesn't exist, or mages at all, or ghosts, or werewolves, or fairies. Or where they do exist, but they work differently. You ought to communicate this, especially if it's gonna become relevant, or if you have, people who are experts on World of Darkness laws, like, by the way, this might become relevant, but it's not the case. However, I do encourage you not to get rid of the technocracy in your world simply because it seems like an overwhelming threat. Even if you are in fact worried that because vampires are very much reality deviants, the technocracy is going to show up and make short work of them, that's just because the technocracy is very good at its job. Most vampires don't know it exists at all, and the very few who do are probably worried about this exact scenario. But you might have noticed that it hasn't happened. It's all fine, they're not going to send a hit mark into Elysium when all the Primogen are there. Because not only are vampires pretty low priority when it comes to threats to humanity, the technocracy also prefers to be subtle in the way it operates, making as little noise as possible. Oh, a hit mark, by the way, is a Terminator, like an actual for real human-looking killer robot that can tear through a minivan like it's made out of paper mache and that has reflexes that make a housefly look slow and ponderous. That is a real official canon thing that exists in the World of Darkness. You'd need like a jacked up, battle-hardened elder to go toe-to-toe with one of these things. Except, of course, for an operation like that, the technocracy would utilize at least 3 hit marks alongside a contingent of field agents, battle-hardened themselves, of course, equipped with plasma cannons that simulate coronal mass ejections from the sun. But they won't do that, because it's loud and expensive. And
So the reason why they haven't gone and wiped out the vampires is just compared to the other things that they're worrying about. So as I said, vampires are on the priority list, but also that the kind of firepower that they would, it sounds actually kind of like the town Warhammer in a certain way. Basically, like when you think about it, where it's they don't want to move very openly and draw a lot of attention, but to actually deal with the vampires, by the sounds of it, it would just by nature of what they'd have to bring in to deal with them effectively, it would be something that would draw a lot of attention, and so they just leave them be for now.
also because it wouldn't really solve anything. Vampires are affected by consensus, which believes that they're not real, and that's made life a lot harder for them in recent centuries. But, and technocrats hate him, Cain isn't just a story, or, whoever is the thing that cursed Cain to become the first vampire. There exists a reality beyond consensus, and, mages go there physically from time to time. And vampires, alongside with werewolves and fairies and all manner of spirits and ghosts, are the consequence of things that exist anchored outside of consensus within the objective reality beyond consensus. Very irritatingly, for all kinds
so that's why vampires are immune to paradox.
of mages, they get their own mini consensus that protects them from paradox backlash for doing shit that is objectively impossible. Consensus is actually an extremely complex and multi-layered phenomenon, no matter how much technocracy propaganda would like you to believe otherwise. This is why, even if the technocracy entirely devoted themselves to destroying vampires, they wouldn't be able to do it. All they can do is limit the damage and focus their resources on dealing with much larger existential threats. Plus, they'd rather create a new resource, something to be utilized to pursue their own mission, rather than create a new enemy. This manipulation of assets outside the technocracy is what agents call attunement. And it can happen in many different ways. Flashing a badge, extending a helping hand, sowing conspiracy theories, making overt threats, paying someone money. It's crude, but it works. Think about this. What is the major social edict, like the main one in vampire society? The one rule that not just the Camarilla, but also the Anarchs and even the Sabbat that fundamentally disagrees with this idea respect. It's the
Oh, well, isn't it the idea of staying hidden? Since, well, yeah, a human with a shotgun can take down a vampire, and there's a lot more humans than there are vampires.
the masquerade. The thing that's literally in the title of the game. Make sure humans don't know we exist. You think this is an accident? If so, it happens to be a very convenient one. The technocracy is of course highly suspicious of vampires, but they do not as such currently consider them a major threat to consensus. Some of them even quite like them precisely because they have the good sense to clean up their own messes. If the Camarilla stopped being the predominant vampiric society, that would be a problem for the technocracy. So they can pull strings, they can move things around a little bit. And look, whenever there is like vampires that do really step out of line, the situation can't be contained even by the Camarilla. There's always the Second Inquisition. Not nowadays in the new law, but also, you know, why not? And part of the Second Inquisition are affiliated with the technocracy. Other parts of the Second Inquisition, technocracy probably doesn't like because those are also reality deviants. Seriously, hunters give the technocracy big cluster headaches. It is much easier to just sit back, not necessarily relax, do other things instead, and just keep an eye out on vampire society. And maybe then when something like Zapatasura Awakening happens, you step in and do something. Shit, the technocracy even will work with vampires, even other mages who are reality deviants, if it doesn't interfere with their mission and they think they can come out on top of that interaction. Management doesn't like it, of course, so you'll have to keep your fingers crossed and pray that they don't argue with the results, which I just incidentally keeping your fingers crossed and praying for a certain outcome is also reality deviance. Sorry. And usually
Don't do any reality deviance. Otherwise, supervisor will have to hear about that.
not even the night folk way beyond vampires don't even know what they're dealing with, that they're dealing with the technocracy. And that's a good thing. Acting unnoticed, getting in and out without a trace, cleaning up messes and never making any of your own, that's like half the training program of the technocracy. They need to be subtle, always intelligence focused, learning everything there is to know about a target before taking precise, surgical action where they can control as many factors as possible. You wouldn't believe how often Second Inquisition activity is actually just some NWO blacksuit who got careless. The majority of the operations that the technocracy undertakes are in fact focused on convincing the general public that no, there are not, in fact, monsters hiding in the night. Which can be surprisingly difficult when there's, like, claw monsters and fang monsters and tentacle monsters pushing themselves through the rips of reality in the age where everyone has a camera on them at all times. Several cameras even. Look, this one, it has 2 cameras. Why does it need 2 cameras? It has another one in the front. Why does it need that? Because we can do it. We're very good at this technology now. But it is, of course, essential to keep people in the dark about this, because if they found out the truth, it would completely upend the technocracy's mission of creating a safe, one-size-fits-all consensus. A lot of monsters have disappeared because people stopped believing in them. The process of creating this unified global consensus is
Huh. Well, I guess that's why people don't really see dragons anymore. Although, he did mention earlier about the hunters giving them headaches. So I kind of wonder why the technocracy and the hunters don't get along. Well, because the hunters, because the technocracy seems like they have the best interests of humanity as a whole in mind. And so I honestly was kind of expecting they'd work more with the hunters.
It's called terra norming, and it is actually immensely complex as an operation. You see, the technocracy doesn't just get to dictate reality. They don't just say, this is what it is, and then everyone believes it. It subtly manipulates what the masses believe because it is essential that they actually believe it. Can't just be something that they heard the authority say. They need to believe in that authority. It is a
So it sounds like they probably either entirely control or have a very much vested interest in the educational systems of pretty much any country in existence, and also a hand in what shapes its present culture, since, cultural beliefs would also play into that. Also sounds like they'd also probably have to get involved in more open politics as well, in order to build rapport with people. So that when they try to push the idea of, hey, there's no monsters, it's from a recognizable and trusted public figure.
delicate art of Overton window manipulation. And the easiest way to get people to buy into their vision is, of course, to make that vision be something that people respond to positively. Something that they can gain something out of. Contrary to popular adage, the masses are not actually stupid, and they're actually quite astute at noticing when the situation at large is not really set up in a way that is particularly beneficial to them. It is entirely within their power to reject the reality that the technocracy has manufactured for them. One of the places where this is tremendously illustrated is actually currently post-revolutionary Mongolia, where the technocracy has kind of the grip has slipped, let's just say. A lot of people have gotten back to believing in old or sometimes even new worldviews. So there's a lot of superstitionism, a lot of tradition mages being rather powerful out there on the steppes. Though to be fair, it is one of the few places where the technocracy is losing the battle against reality deviants. The main incentives that the
Actually, that also now makes me wonder about something. So since the technocracy wants to wipe out all these, long-held cultural beliefs and whatnot, to, convince people that magic, monsters, those sorts of things don't exist, they also they're into cultural destruction, essentially, which, considering what's actually happening to people in Inner Mongolia right now, that's one of the points into them being the bad guys, despite how good their overall goal sounds like it'd be for humanity.
technocracy has are, of course, safety from mostly things that they don't even want people to believe in, but still the abstract concept of safety from whatever ideas people have about danger that are, intrinsically tied to monsters. Living conditions, of course, everyone wants good living conditions. And tied to that, of course, the wonders of technology. Now, we've actually talked about the efficacy of technology as a magical focus before in my video about, regular Mage, when we talked about the virtual adepts and the Society of Ether, both of which are breakaway factions from the technocracy. But yeah, you can use technology to do pretty much anything that is unbelievable, which conversely also means that just because you're doing something through technology doesn't automatically make it believable. It will not inherently protect the caster from paradox, because it is not inherently necessarily part of consensus, just because current consensus is, thanks to the technocracy, technology dominated.
If someone tries to convince you that they have somehow managed to pick the lock on a door using a can opener, I don't even know how that would even work. How do you even fit the can opener into a position where something like that would even be possible?
If I get a teleporter pad and put it out in the middle of the park and use it to beam myself to a space station, that shit don't fly. I mean, it also, even if it works, it don't fly. That's the point of it. You go up there without having to fly, you teleport. But the point is the reality police won't like it. And that is why, when the technocracy really needs to do that kind of thing, they do not do it in the middle of the park. Even though you might think intuitively that that would be a great way to demonstrate that that kind of technology exists. It isn't actually. It is way too on the nose to do terra norming with it. Nevertheless, we have all kinds of technological marvels and procedures that are commonplace today, and which would have been rejected as utterly impossible just a few decades ago. Introducing all that cannot simply be a matter of showing it off and hoping that people will believe what they just saw. The technocracy doesn't even just hand out new technology to the masses. They have already developed it, but what they will do is they will guide scientists and engineers who are sleepers, or at least extraordinary citizens, to its own discovery, which in turn requires astroturfing people's beliefs into the viability of that kind of thing. And though the consensus is supposed to be unified, globalized, and universal across the globe, and it may often seem like it is, it's not. Like, it really is not. Look, right, they're trying to there's a blanket around the world, and they're trying to iron it perfectly smooth. Even though the blanket is made out of an infinite patchwork of materials, and it changes in size, it doesn't really fit the world even, and it has holes too. Quite frankly, they've done an impressive job thus far. But even within the technocracy itself, they don't agree on what the consensus should be. Especially nowadays that we have this diverse, globalized technocracy that is making the attempt at reconciling the problematic shit it has done in the past.
Yeah, and also considering, that they let in people with somewhat differing views because as you mentioned before, needing more diverse array of thinkers to tackle the kind of complex problems that they deal with at times. But I'm going to end this here, and I'll pick up the reaction in part 2 tomorrow. I hope you guys enjoyed watching with me. This has definitely been fun and informative to watch. But TheBurgerkrieg definitely puts a lot of work into all the research and scripting for his videos. And they're fun to watch. I'd highly recommend that you follow his stuff if you're not doing so already. And if you've enjoyed watching with me, I'd appreciate if you like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps. But until next time, ta-ta!